שאנחנו מספרים, איזה שתי קונספציות שמספרים ומשחקים אחד עם השני, וחלק הראשון של הסיפור הוא 3,000 שנה הראשונות, והחלק השני הוא אם אנחנו משתמשים בקטגוריות האלו, איך הרעיונות האלו יכולים לשנות את הסיפור שאנחנו מספרים, בנוגע לשאלות המהותיות של ישראל ויהדות העולם.
אז לא רק ספר, זה גם הצעה.
זה הצעה, כן. זה הצעה לאיך לראות את הסיפור של היהודים.
וואו,
Who are we? אני ניסיתי אותו על עשרות אלפי אנשים במשך 15 שנה, חלקים שונים ופרקים שונים, ועכשיו...
איזה יופי.
So it's very nice, כן.
ואתה מוציא את זה בעברית ובאנגלית?
עכשיו זה נגמר באנגלית, ועכשיו אני אעביר אותו לתרגום בעברית. וגם הספר הקודם שלי, שעכשיו אני מקווה תוך כמה חודשים אני אגמור את התרגום שלו לעברית. אף פעם לא תרגמתי דברים לעברית. It's like I was stupid.
שוב, יש כאן קהל גדול שרוצה לשמוע אותך. זה חשוב.
quero saber se já está conectado na transmissão. Tá com limão. Pronto aí? Bom, eu gostaria de pedir a todos e todas, se puderem tomar seus assentos, tomar os seus lugares.
Good afternoon. We would kindly ask you to take your seats and also put your cell phones on the mute. That's what I just did with mine. We want to start, please.
Senhoras e senhores,
ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We would like to inform you that this event has simultaneous interpretation, both English and Portuguese, and Libras, the Brazilian Sign Language. Those of you who are in our virtual learning environment also have English and Portuguese at that service, and they can select the language they prefer. And for those of you who are with us, giving us much pleasure, at the entrance there are special equipment for translation, and you can have 100% understanding of the conference. I am Kelita Cohen, and it's a great honor to be able to coordinate the activities of the Academia Judaica, the Jewish Academy, the continuous education arm that CIP, Congregação Israelita Paulista, CIP launches today for Brazil and the Portuguese-speaking countries. We now give the floor and mention the presence of Mr. Mário Fleck, our president, and also the presidents of the voluntary director of this Academia Judaica, Raul Meyer, and also the volunteers who are part of the member of the directorate board. We have the incentive of the law for the development and culture. We have the sponsorship of Bimel, Robor, and several others, and also the support of the Oshman Family Jewish Community Center of California, the Shalom Hartman Institute, Ruth Calderon from Alma, and other individual donors that support our academy. To all of you, our most sincere thanks. And having said that, I give the floor to Mario Fleck, President of Congregação Israelita Paulista, SIP, and the Jewish Academy. Good afternoon. The Academia Judaica is the result of a lot of reflection and strategies that we had at the board of directors of SIPI. We intend to occupy the necessary room for the offer of access to a millenary richness, and which is very important for the Jewish community and our admirers. The Academia Judaica has partnerships with other important institutions in the practice of the dissemination of the Jewish culture throughout Brazil, such as many others, and international institutions, as Kelita said, the Atikva Foundation, the Shalom Hartman Institute. And we also give our thanks to the total support of the board of directors of SIPI and to the members of our curators group, starting with the Rabbi Dr. Ruben Sternschein, Chief Rabbi of this congregation, Mr. Raul Meyer, Mr. Raul Gottlieb, Rabbi Rogério Kuckerman, Professor Aminda Flader, Rabbi Luciana Pajek, and Leonardo Stenberg. Also the members of the consulting committee, Marcelo Raschlin, Marcos Lederman, Eduardo Alcalay, Oliver Misner, Walter Steninger, and Andre Grunbaum. Also our marketing committee, composed by Melina Sternberg of our communications team at SIPI, Paulo Weg of our members, board of directors, Ronaldo Gottlieb of our consulting board, and our untireless Kelita Cohen. One of the many inspirations to start thinking in the project of a Jewish Academy came from the author of a book with whom we had much contact, Tol Kanan, who wrote God is in the Canyon. The central inspiration paragraph to everything that we start today states the following: looking backwards, we, the custodians of Jewish history, can appreciate its impressive longevity. We are able to recognize its specific characteristics, those that not even Yehuda Anasi, the author of the Mishnah, one of the most important texts written almost 2,000 years ago, could have imagined the extent of its impact. But if Rabbi Yehuda and all the successive generations that preserved this legacy for so much time could ask us one only question, this question should be, who are you in order to finish all of that? Who are you to end it? As Tal Kanan says in his book. Well, the Jewish Academy will be one of our responses. We are proposing a Jewish fashion of studying Judaism in all its ampleness through our thinking heads and learning from discussions and debates. If it depends on us, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi will be very, very proud. We now open our inauguration symposium. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your attention, and enjoy our session. We thank our president for his warm words, and having been officially opened this act of launch of the Academia Judaica, we now open the symposium, which is called The Best of 5,000 Years of Culture. It will be moderated by our Rabbi Dr. Ruben Sternschein and Raul Gottlieb. Rabbi Sternschein came here after directing a liberal community in Spain for 10 years and 4 years in Jerusalem. He has a BS in education, an MB from the Hebrew University, and his PhD from the Hebrew Union College, where he got his rabbinical diploma. He is the coordinator of research in the laboratory of culture and behavior of this university. He is a representative for the interreligious dialogue at CONIBI. He leads several initiatives for the people on the streets, for other important purposes, and he is the dean of the academic activities of CIPI. Raul Gottlieb is the president of the ARI in Rio de Janeiro. He is the director of the Varim magazine. He is part of the board of the World Union for Progressive Judaism in Latin America. And we now give the floor to Rabbi Ruben Sternstein to start with the tribute to Rabbi Fritz Pinkas, and then we will introduce the members of the international panel.
Obrigado, Kelita.
Thank you very much, Kalita. If Emmanuel Levinas, one of the most distinguished recent philosophers, said that the Jewish issues have an infinite reading and generate an always changing reading, which is very enriching. The contribution of the Jewish Academy will be to enrich the personal identity of each of the participants, encouraging the constant enriching of bringing the new and the depth of Jewish traditions and literature, and bringing it to the general public. We believe that this is what Judaism is, a source of infinite reading, which are able to be done and sometimes get lost in the walls, in the groups of specialists. And the Jewish Academy wants to bring this into the general public. What the specialists discover will be at the reach of everybody. And this will be a new signification, a resignification of the Jewish content. But the main novelty will be in its method. There will be a house of learning of Judaism with short courses on different subjects, on philosophy, on history, on Israel, ethics, and the current news. They will focus on new insights, and this will be the main difference. They will always approach the relationship between contents and people and their daily lives. It will no longer be learning just for the sake of learning and knowledge for the sake of knowledge. We will also have specific groups according to professions, medicines and Judaism, law and Judaism, psychology and Judaism, groups of writers, musicians, literary critics, and entrepreneurs. There will be theme trips to Israel, training for rabbis, leaders, and the distribution of important materials. It will be based on CIPI, to which we should thank for the ability and the help to make this a reality. I want to thank the board, the members of the board, in the person of Mario Fleck for his challenging impetus, pushing us every day towards more and more realizations in all the areas. I also want to thank Raul Meyer and all the board for their constant insights. To Kelita Cohen for his untirable work, for the Shidduch Mario Federman made to bring us Mario Fleck, who was dreaming with the Jewish house of learning, which was in his mind for ages. I would like to personally thank the members of the publishing company and dissemination group for the production of this event, Evie, Rachel, Simone, and also a special thanks for the CIPE volunteers. And here I mention Laura, who is unfatigable in all the tasks she is in charge of, and Aharon Be'aharon Haviv, to my dear co-rabbis and friends, and to also mention the name of the founder rabbi of CIPI, Professor Dr. Fritz Pincus, who always worked for the density of studies. And we will pay tribute to him, which will be introduced by his son. And then we will say the Kaddish devoted to his memory, expressing our thanks for everything he did in terms of challenging everything that existed. And we hope to expand his work and continue doing it. Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank CIPI for having remembered in such a dignified occasion our heritage and the heritage of this Kehillah. I thank Rabbi Dr. Ruben Sternshine and his team for the dedication in trying to honor the memory of Dr. Fritz Pincus, my father. First, I want to say that the Jewish learning, recognizing what we are today, is due to the fact that we are supported by all the generations that came before us. The behavior of such attitude since the Enlightenment, since the Haskalah, is the contrary of passively accepting the past. We have to compare the tradition and its expression in terms of the contemporaneity. We have to remember that throughout the life of our people, traditions were at the time they were started, innovations. And we are remembering here the teachings of Rabbi Dr. Fritz Pincus, who besides being a very dedicated person to the studies, had as the slogan of his life was expressed by 3 verbs: study, teaching, and helping. In order to correctly interpret and reform our heritage, Professor Pincus told us when it was necessary to have the knowledge and the deep thought and study. We are speaking about a rabbi who was very enthusiastic whenever he said the Shabbat Tehillim, which says, the not learned man is not able to understand these concepts. And he thought that every generation of Jews has not only the right, but the obligation to add their comments to the tradition he received from his forefathers. If he didn't do, he would be indifferent. And rabbis hate indifference. The Jewish Academy is totally in line with the teachings of Rabbi Pincus. The creative study of our tradition should be a continuous method. At the end of my words, I want to transmit what I learned from Rabbi Eli Spitz on the origin of the Jewish Kaddish Yatom. It does not mention death. It is derived from the Kaddish de Rabbanan, which our sages mentioned after studying a sacred text as a form of happiness for having been able to do it. And when we remember one of our forefathers, equally, after this short text, we should be happy for the legacy this person left to us. Thank you very much. So we would kindly ask the present, those who are present here, to say the Kaddish, and then we close the 3 days of tribute to our master, to our teacher, our founding father. Amen. 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 We can sit now, and before we directly start our symposium, I would like to mention the name of two other people who are here with us and which make us very proud. And by mentioning Rabbi Uri Lam, I mentioned the trajectory of all the members of the Reform Council of Rabbis of Brazil, and specifically thank Dora, who was the president who brought me into this kehillah, into this community. And thank you very much. We will thank you now and every time we see something important. We were checking now to see how we connect again with Raul, who is in Rio de Janeiro. Raul Gottlieb. It's a lot of technology, and we are just beginning. You will see how much more we will have in the future. You see now Raul Gottlieb? Yes, you do. Most welcome, Raul. We will now introduce the members of this panel. We know them very well. First, we have to explain that we will have two parts in this symposium. The first part was previously taped with two of the three members of the panel in order to make translation easier through captions. And then the second part will be the reaction to this first debate with the third member of the panel. And then we will open for the discussion, and they will have the possibility to answer questions from the public. So please feel free to be with us, those of you who are with us through the different streamings. We were honored with 1,000 participants. Wow. And we will continue our discussions afterwards also, and that's why we are creating a Jewish academy. And those of you who are with us, you received a small notebook so you can write out your questions and send them up to us. So the first part, we will listen and see the debate that was made with the moderation of both Raul Gottlieb and myself, interviewing Dr. Ruth Calderon, who in my opinion is the member of the Knesset, the Haverat Knesset, which has a most deep knowledge and who was most opened. Her, her debates became sources of study throughout the planet. We are very sorry that you're no longer at the Knesset, but we are happy that you are still doing and coping with all your tasks. She wrote several books in one of them she mentions myself and also Rabbi Nilton Bonder from Rio de Janeiro, who made speeches and wrote books on her work. And she directs a very creative institution called Alma. For us, it means soul, but neshama, but in Hebrew, it means, it emphasizes the inspiring side of Judaism towards artists, toward the arts and other disciplines as well. Also, in the first part of the debate, we had with us Mr. Zach Bodner, who is the CEO of one of the most important JCCs in the US. This is the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, California. And from there, he is one of the leaders of the JCC of the Oshman family, which is the largest one in the Jewish world. He has a master in philosophy of religion and theology and a B.S. From Yale, and he worked at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, both in yeshivot and in business schools. So now we will watch this debate, the first part of the debate with the subtitles in Portuguese, and then we will listen to the reaction of Daniel Hartman, Rabbi Daniel Hartman. He is a PhD and president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, besides being one of the sons of my master, Rabbi Dr. Professor David Hartman, whom I had the pleasure of being his student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and made me be more passionate about everything I do and hope I will do. He wrote a book saying how to put God second and religion first. So this means to put God in the second place in order to save the religion from itself. And this is how everything Daniel Hartman does. Extremely creative, diversified, dynamic, and controversial. And that's why he is with us today. The three of them will help us think the present, the past, and the future of the Jewish people of Israel and Judaism, and to see if our diagnosis through the academy will help the Jews. First part now. Muito obrigado, Raul, é ótimo estar aqui. Muito obrigado pelo convite, Rabino Ruben, obrigado pelo convite. Obrigado pelo convite. E eu entendo que isso é algo novo na sua academia.
Now, doing diagnosis, as every doctor knows, first of all, you want to not do any harm. And I'm not sure that I can do a diagnosis to a community that I unfortunately didn't visit. It's one of my dreams to come to Brazil and to be more in South and Central America, but what I'm going to say is based on my understanding of Tel Aviv and some of New York, Haifa, but you will have to implement it on your knowledge of the people. I I think some of the project that you are building now is similar to what I tried to do at Alma from 1996. and at Elul from 10 years even later, before. And that is to find, to build a place, to build some kind of space that is using the richness of academia and the richness of Bet Midrash, the intimacy, the learning in small groups, the relevancy, to study something that is relevant, that you're passionate about, and in the same time to use the knowledge of the best thinkers and researchers of the day. In order to use all of these richness, you need to build a new place. And my way of work is usually to go to the people, to the Jews of the time, and to see what they do and what they need. Not to bring the Jews to Judaism, but to bring Judaism to the Jews. And I'm sure that the community itself has some issues that is important to them, and that around which the academia could be useful and alive. I usually start very small with a room and a table and people sitting around it and studying classic texts, studying Bible, Mishnah, Talmud, Yerushalmi, Midrash, Chassidut, Kabbalah, and so forth, until texts that are written today, literature, poetry, film, music, and so on. And out of the energy that comes out of Chavruta study, of studying small groups and in pairs, a community of scholars, of study community is being built, and it builds an energy that affects, in ripple effects, in my view, the whole city and then the whole country. We focus on people that are creating culture. So we have the fellows of Alma. It's a group of about 20 or 30 young people after the bachelor's that come to study a full program of something like 12 to 20 hours a week for hopefully 2 years. And that is like the base that builds the energy. And around it, we have Bet Midrash, house of study for script writers, for poets, for writers, for plastic arts, for dancers, for different guilds of art. And we see it's been going on for 2 decades, as you said, and we see how for example, as script writers, they have a very special way of reading classic texts, for example, Talmud. And then you see in the next years how the Talmud is affecting the work and the films and the television series that are being created. So we are trying to bring Judaism out of just the traditional institutions like synagogue and maybe community center and so on, and bring it out to the theater, to the movie theater, to the dance floor, anywhere that in Israel that culture is being created by Jews. It is Jewish culture for me. I know it is a much bigger challenge for diaspora communities when the public space is not necessarily Jewish. The Jewish public space, as you well know, is a challenge and an opportunity. It's not easy to hold public space between different streams and different, every 2 Jews have a different idea to the public space on Shabbat, for example. But it's also a beautiful opportunity because everything we do, radio, television, books, so on, it's all creating a snow globe of Jewish culture. So if I will sum it all up, one is that you know much better than any advisor, and you should listen to the people, and they will know what they need. And 2, and I know that we are different in this, you build much bigger things, but I believe in starting very small and and letting it grow organically. That will be my opening.
Thank you, Ruth. Zach Bonder escreveu há pouco tempo um livro que diz que se chama Why Do Jewish? Ou seja, por quê?
which is called Why Do Jewish? Why to do things in a Jewish way? Not why to be Jewish, but why to do it Jewishly. So we would like we would like you to confirm to you which is the thesis of your book and how does it apply to our diagnosis of what's happening in Brazil with the Jews, and what's your opinion based on your experience of our proposal of contribution.
Raul and my friend Mario, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. It's an honor to just sit on a panel with you, Ruth. We've been friends for a long, long time, and it's great to be able to be in this dialogue. And I love what you are doing down there in Sao Paulo. Building this Jewish Academy is just a phenomenal opportunity for the entire community. And I think you're asking the right questions. You're asking the questions of how do we make Jewish life meaningful, relevant, and joyful today? How do we ensure that this next generation, especially the generation of young people, is going to want to continue to do Jewish? As you mentioned in my intro, I talk about doing Jewish rather than being Jewish. In my mind, it's about the doing. It's about making sure we're engaging in a way that makes Jewish life meaningful for us, making it relevant. Look, if you're leaving the Swiss Alps wearing a big winter coat and you come down to Carnival in Brazil, you're going to take the winter coat off, right? You're going to shed the things that become irrelevant and no longer useful to you. And if the young people today see Judaism and our Jewish life as being irrelevant, they're going to shed it. So we have to continuously iterate and reiterate and find ways to make our traditions and our heritage relevant for today. We have to find ways to keep them engaged. And in my mind, it's about the doing. It's about the tachlis, right? You know this, it's a great Yiddish word. The Israelis have adopted it into modern Hebrew nomenclature. But tachlis is this word which means getting down to business, getting down to brass tacks, right? If you're in one of these meetings where too many people are just talking too much, you could say, no, what's the tachlis? Let's get down to it. But the epigraph for my book is a quote from David Ben-Gurion, which is words without deeds are nothing. And that sums it up. I mean, when you heard Ruth talking about what she has been doing to have a sea change in Israel with Alma, it's about linking the learning to the doing, right? And in my mind, that's exactly what we need to do, Reuven. I think that if we look at this idea of tachlis, first of all, in the book, I've taken tachlis and I've turned it into an acronym. And it lays out what 7 elements I think we need to be doing to make Jewish life relevant for today. And I'll go through them very quickly. But I think that that's going to be the answer to making sure that your Jewish Academy is successful. It's not just an ivory tower. It's not just taking the learnings of the great works of Jewish life, Torah and Talmud. It's also the modern works, but it's linking them to doing. You heard Ruth talking about modern cinema and modern dance and modern art. That's part of this. So let me take you briefly through tachlis as a model, and then we can get into how maybe that can also be something that brings the young people back to Judaism, especially if they're finding other ways to identify today, right? Many people are no longer just Jewish. Jewish used to be our operating system, right? 200 years ago, if you were Jewish, it defined everything about you. It defined where you lived, how you dressed, how you ate, who you married. Today, if you're Jewish, it can be one element of your operating system, and there can be so many other pieces, right? So how do we make Jewish life one of the main parts of your operating system? Well, let's talk tachlis. So the T in tachlis is tikkun olam, right? Many young people are defining their identities today by doing good in the world, by giving back, by social action. That's what we call it in English. Social impact, social responsibility. And that's not always Jewish. It could be environmental justice. It could be racial justice. It could be poverty issues, right? But a lot of young people are making their mark in the world and having an impact through tikkun olam. And that's very Jewish. And we have to embrace that. And again, that's the doing. The A is for art and culture. Reuven, you mentioned that, the food is an important part of how we express our Jewishness. It's also about the music. Ruth, you talked about dance and you talked about cinema. That's an important part of defining our connection to our people from way, way back to going in the future. I don't like when people disparagingly call Jews bagels and lox Jews. Like somehow they're lesser than because they just connect with their Jewishness through, falafel, or they love yotam aulenge, whatever it is. That's okay. That's an entry point. That's an easy portal for them to connect to their Jewishness. And then it's about digging deeper. The C is community. We know that Jewish life is all about connections to each other, right? I think it's the first or second mitzvah, commandment in the Torah, which says it's not good for humans to be alone, right? We are about dancing the hora together as a group. We're about davening in a minyan, a group of people. As Ruth said, we're about studying in chavruta, We are all about the community and coming together. So that's the C in Tachlis. The H is for holidays and rituals. So much about what we do is marking time, marking the life cycle, marking the year, celebrating with each other, mourning with each other when we need to. And being and doing Jewish is so much a part of how we embrace holidays and rituals. And it doesn't mean we have to do all of them. Don't start at the fast of Gedalia, right? Start with the simpler stuff. Start with the easier things that make more sense and make it relevant for today, right? If it's about finding a way for Sukkot to be meaningful today, what I do with my kids when we build a sukkah, I say, look, you ought to be grateful and appreciative for the roof over our head and the food on our table. Not everybody has that today. So I know that Sukkot commemorates when we were wandering in the desert and putting up these temporary dwellings, but I also know that we have to make it relevant for today. So that's the H. The L in Tachlis is perhaps the central piece, especially for you, Ruvain, as you're dealing with this academy. The L is for learning. We are the people of the book. We have to engage in learning, right? As Ruth said, it's about engaging with our ancient texts, but I also think it's about the full Jewish canon. It's about Ruth's books. It's about the books of Yehuda Kurtzer and Danny Gordis. It's about the comedy of Sarah Silverman and the Larry David shows. And it's about the whole modern Jewish canon. We have to learn. If we're going to be able to know what we're doing to change the future, we have to learn about our past. The I in Tachlis is for Israel. And we could go into that because I think that Israel is a central part of Jewish identity. And finally, the S is for Shabbat and spirituality. I think it was Echad Ha'am who said it's not so much that the Jews have kept Shabbat, but that Shabbat has kept the Jews. It's such an important element of who we are. And I'm not suggesting you have to be Shomer Shabbos. I, for one, am not. But recognizing that Shabbat is an important element to our identity, it became clear for me. I'll end with this quick story, Ruvain, and turn it back to you. But during COVID, many of us were working from home. And I found it very easy to just work all the time, right? My days started to blend into each other. My wife and I had this ongoing joke. Are we working from home or are we living at work, right? Because anytime we were bored, anytime we had nothing to do, anytime it was a Shabbat weekend, we would just pop open the laptop and get back to work. And it wasn't healthy. And I talked to my friend, Tiffany Schlein, who wrote this great book called 24/6. And she has this notion of a tech-free Shabbat. She's not Shomer Shabbos, but you have to set a day apart to recognize it's holy. Time is holy. As Abraham Joshua Heschel says, Shabbat is a cathedral in time. So the S in Tachlis is about Shabbat and spirituality, finding a way to make our spirituality relevant today. If you don't want to daven and shul 3 times a day, fine. Find Buddhist meditation or find some other way for you to connect to the holiness of the world around you, to the holiness of God, and for the oneness of the universe. And in my mind, Ruvain, if we can embrace Tachlis, if we can make the learning that happens at the Jewish Academy tied to real world action, it will bring back a revolution, a renaissance in Jewish life in the next century.
Muito bonito, muito obrigado. As palavras.
Very beautiful what you said, very beautiful words, Jack. I would like to mention the issue of the Tikkun Olam within Tachlis, because Tikkun Olam is something very universal. It is by no means specifically Jewish. So the focus that we have on Tikkun Olam makes the Jewishness in it get lost. And I think, therefore, that all the other letters in Tachlis can go away, because as Zach said, in terms of spirituality, you can have a Buddhist meditation. So it's suddenly not Shabbat, but any group realization, group accomplishment that you have to clean the planet, for instance, is Tikkun Olam. So in today's moment, today's day, how can we make the universal and the particular in Jewishness get together closer, specifically in trying not to be in Israel where Jewishness is there, but for those of us who are not there, how to do it?
If we think about this in the sense of doing as opposed to being, it may open up our lens a little bit. I'll tell you a quick story. We have a Japanese woman on our board of directors here at our Jewish Community Center. She's not Jewish. She didn't convert. She married a Jewish guy, but he just happens to be Jewish because he was born of Jewish parents, right? He doesn't really do a whole lot. She's the one who makes Shabbat dinner. She makes a Passover Seder, which is very cool with Japanese influences. She schleps her kids to Hebrew school, prepping for bar mitzvah. She is chairing our mission to Israel this summer, where I'll see you again soon, hopefully, Ruth. She's doing Jewish. She's the one who's part of our mishpacha. So in my mind, yes, there's elements of this role that are not Jewish. Tikkun Olam could be making the world a better place, very much not in a Jewish context, but it's coming from a Jewish place. So if we define the Judaism, the Jewishness, the Jewish peoplehood of the next generation or more in terms of tachlis, in terms of doing, then we're going to feel a lot less angst, a lot less utziness about, well, is it Jewish enough? Is it not Jewish? I run a Jewish community center where a lot of people say, look, just coming to work out and play basketball, just coming to sit around in the schwitz, why is that a Jewish event? Well, it's not necessarily a Jewish event. We have all been doing this for the last 100 years at JCCs because it's about the congregating amongst Jews. But if these days people are marrying non-Jews, if they're raising their families with Jewish traditions and non-Jewish traditions as well, they're bringing them in, we have to find a way to make this whole thing a +1. And I'm suggesting that by thinking about it in terms of the doing, we can open our minds to this. So just going back to the beginning of your question about Tikkun Olam, if you want to make the world a better place by engaging in environmentalism, that doesn't necessarily have to be Jewish, but look, let's tie it to Tu B'Shvat. Let's tie it to the Shemitah year. Let's find ways to bring out the Jewish values in environmentalism and make sure that our young people who are doing this know that they're doing this because they have Jewishness in their kishkas, that it's in their neshama, that this is the reason why they're doing this. And again, remember, our whole mission on earth is to be a light unto the nations. So we don't have to just be doing Jewish for the Jews. It's a good thing to do this for the rest of the world as well. That's my take.
I love everything you said, Zach. It was much. I wanted to applaud and I didn't find the icon. It's really very beautiful. And thank you for your book and for your words. And I saw it alive at the JCC in Palo Alto, the old people living together with the kindergartens and the holidays and the Israeli center. It's incredible. At the same time, I wouldn't like Judaism to be like McDonald's, that you eat the same, the same McDonald's everywhere in the world. I think different communities have created different Jewish worlds. And Brazil has a very specific and special sense and smell and taste and tone. And I don't think everything that works today for young people in North America is the same solution that would work for South America. Even, my father used to say, he was joking, that every people get the Jews they deserve. He used to say it about my mother's parents from Europe. And I think something very deep is very wise about it, that different Jews live in Catholic atmospheres or in Protestant atmospheres or in Muslim atmospheres, and they are building a different kind of Jewish life. And so today I do believe, and I see it with my kids, that environment is maybe the first thing that is on young people's minds. They're afraid that the world is being ruined and they won't have a place to raise their children. And it is, and it could be a Jewish opportunity, but maybe the frame Tikkun Olam is not exactly how they would say it in Brazil. Maybe they will come up with different things. I think we shouldn't put the words in their mouth. Zach has been kind of collecting and giving words to things that he already knows and cultivated for so many years. In your case, I would say, let's be more modest and open, like when we are parents and raise children. They come already with what they are. We need to give them the atmosphere, the safe space, the beauty of the space, the intriguing professors or books or movies or whatever, to let them build what only the Brazil Jews know how to build. So I wouldn't take it not from Tel Aviv and not from Palo Alto, but of course there's inspiration. It's like Kinat Sofrim, the jealousy of scribes. That I see something in Palo Alto, I want to do it also in Tel Aviv. We do together some of the holidays. In Alma, for example, the first time, 26 years ago, we started with Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the all-night study session of Shavuot. That before we did it was only in the religious world. And we took it and we opened it from year to year, from 80 people, it grew to 3,000 people in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, all night until morning, with sessions and study and museum walks and all kinds of things until sunrise. And that became our main holiday. Maybe your main holiday will be, I don't know if Purim and the Carnival is close to each other, but whatever makes
Yes.
sense to your community, and then you are adding your own brick to the wall of the Jewish people and to this never-ending conversation that David Hartman used to talk about, that everyone are invited to link in like a big Zoom conversation of all times, beyond space and beyond time, and hear what other people have said and join and say something of your own. And so I'm happy and intrigued by being on the birthbed of this new academia and watching what will become of it. How will it be specifically Brazilian? And both Zach and I am sure would love to visit when the world will be open again.
As duas contribuições e nos
The
encorajam.
two contributions are an encouragement to us to go on in our road, a longer road. But I would like to go up front in our conversation. On the one hand, we just learned from the two of you that on the one side, Zach was saying that the important is that at least there is something Jewish. Not all the Jewish modes, but at least one. You say that there is not only one path ahead of us. If some are present, is already okay. So Tikkun is one path, and all the other arts are important, and the Shabbat celebration and the community sense is important. But Ruth, on the other hand, says that don't hurry to see how things are going to be developed in each part of the world. Brazil will have its own face. The academia will develop, and they will study and they will develop their own academy. But now I have two questions. Why should we continue along this Judaism? Why should we study Judaism? Why should we be Jewish? And second question, how to know if yes, this is Judaism? If each one will develop it according to his own view, how will it be to be Jewish?
That's actually how the book is divided into those three chunks, Reuven. It's why, what, and how. So you nailed it. And I think the why is a very personal why. We have to be able to help each other, starting with ourselves, answer that question for ourselves. This question for me was something that's been on my mind since I was in high school. I remember very clearly one of my friends in high school who was Jewish came home with a non-Jewish girlfriend, and his father flipped out on him. He was very upset. And I didn't understand why. I mean, this was a kid who wasn't very observant. I remember once we went to Yom Kippur services and he came home and had a ham and cheese sandwich afterwards. And by the way, that's okay. I don't judge someone's different ways of doing Jewish, doing kashrut. I mean, I don't keep strictly kosher myself. But I remember thinking to myself, if the father is going to be so upset, it was incumbent upon him. It was his responsibility to teach his son why being Jewish was important. It's not fair to come out of the blue and be frustrated and angry. It was like a Tevye moment out of, Fiddler on the Roof, tearing his clothes. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but I felt like it was almost, and he just didn't understand. Because my point is, if you care about your Jewishness, you should be able to maintain it regardless of who you choose to spend your life with. You may not be advocating for intermarriage, but you have to embrace it and be willing to acknowledge that it's here. So how do we make that a +1 instead of a -1? And it starts with being able to answer that question of why. Why is this important? I can marry a good person. This individual, she does good in the world. She's smart. She cares about her family. She's engaged in acts of tikkun olam, right? Like, why wouldn't that be a person I would want to spend the rest of my life with? You have to be able to answer for yourself the why. And for me, it's about my worldview. It's about giving me the values. It's about providing guardrails and a roadmap for how to live my life. It's why am I Jewish is asking me, why am I a Bodner? I am part of this family. So it's a very personal answer to that question. We have to give people the tools so that they can answer it. I think that's part of what learning is about, right? The more you learn, the more you understand why this is who you are. So that's the why piece. And maybe I'll pause there so Ruth can give her take before we jump into the how piece.
Thank you, Zach. First of all, I would not push anyone else to do Jewish. I would share my story and how I see my Jewishness enriching my life. But basically, I feel that our growing up is made of knowing where we came from, what kind of a childhood we had, who were our parents and our grandparents, and as people, where did I come from? What runs in my veins? What are the values that brought me here? Knowing what I'm made of is, first of all, just interesting, and also helps one know ourselves. And when you know yourself, you live, I believe, you live a richer, more meaningful life. And once you know what you got as your heritage, you can decide and choose and evaluate this treasure or this heritage that you got, what part of it you want to carry on and give to someone, to your children or to your students. Masoret, tradition in Hebrew, is coming from the verb mesira, limsor. You receive it from someone, you evaluate what it is, you are happy with some, you are embarrassed with some, and then you try to seduce your children to receiving it from you. That is the basic job of a human being, to receive and then to try to give. And this exercise of receiving, understanding what I have and giving, I believe for myself is making my life meaningful and rich, and not, I am afraid that I know that human life is not forever, but it gives it so much meaning and taste. The fact that I'm not just someone, I'm the daughter of, and I'm the granddaughter of, and I'm called Ruth, and it's from the book of Ruth. I speak Hebrew, and it's the Hebrew that resonates from 2,000, 4,000 years ago. It gives me the opportunity to live a much longer life than the life that I can live biologically. We can live not just one note, but a whole accord of our ancestors, our parents, ourselves, and our children. And for me, it's a great experience. I am still passionate about it, and I will just add, maybe more down to earth. When I was about 13, I was taken out of Israel to Australia for a year. And in that high school in Australia, when I was the only Jewish kid in school, I suddenly felt that it is who I am. Even before I'm a girl or boy, before I'm a specific family, I'm Jewish. And I want to know more about it. And I think out of that loneliness there, I felt very strongly this energy that still keeps me until today to study and learn and enrich this identity of being Jewish. And I would like it to be completely open. I'm not affiliated to one stream or another. I'm just Jewish. And I'm happy and feel at home in any synagogue I walk into and with any community of Jews that I meet. I feel immediately that they're part of my family, and that then we have some kind of solidarity, and that I know they will take care of me. And so it's I feel so fortunate to be Jewish.
I love that. If I can just say, like, Ruth, it's coming back to what you said before, the Tikkun Leil Shavuot is, I feel like it's also about our ability to give to each other based on our different cultures, right? Like for us to have taken some of these incredible Israeli Jewish traditions, the Brazilian, the Mexican, the Russian, right? Like we now have the Zikaron B'Salon as a way of doing Yom HaShoah, right? There's so many things that, in terms of the doing, Ruvain, that this is the beauty of Jewish peoplehood, that we are one family spread out across the globe, and there's different elements of our culture, our traditions, our values, and the way we celebrate that I would love to see us incorporating more and more. When we talk about Jewish food, it's no longer Ashkenazi matzah ball soup and knish, right? It might be falafel, it might be kibbeh, it might, like, Jewish food no longer means what it did 50 years ago, 100 years ago for the Ashkenormative point of view. So I think that what you said is beautiful. And I just hope that we can do more of the interchange and exchange. And I love the idea of coming out to Brazil to see you in person and do it together.
A cultural network. The Jews always built, or were the first ones to build merchants and business network. And today we can build the cultural network.
gostei demais do
Well,
que
I
principalmente
like very much specifically what Ruth said in terms that each place has its own Jewish people. I always joke at home that instead of doing next year and next year, Pesach with gefilte fish, we should do codfish balls, which is typically Portuguese and Brazilian. So I think that this is fundamental. The Jewish community in Latin America is not like the Jewish community in Israel and is not like the Jewish community in the US. That's why we think that academy is so important at the moment, because we only notice that people are working in Brazil without the Jewish values that Zach mentioned. We are operating with almost not remembering them. And there are many ways of doing your life, living your life, but to do it Jewishly requires knowing these values and use them in your daily life, and understand that if I change the food, I'm not changing the value of our culture. Some people say, yeah, you have to do just like your grandpa did. If not, it's not worth. But much to the contrary, it's not like that. And I think that the academy important because this positioning and this understanding is vital for us Jews. And I hope and I'm sure that this academy will be successful. Just to close now, if you had to choose something in Judaism to quote unquote sell it, what would you say? What do you like most?
I am trying to think Brazilian, and what I was so impressed when I met conservative rabbis in Peru of South and Central America, and then I visited Argentina, is that they speak Hebrew. And I think Hebrew is an amazing key that when one has his special language next to Portuguese or Spanish, and knows that his people speak this language, and when you own the language, you can read both classic texts like Bible and today's lyrics of Kobe Oz on the radio. For some beautiful reason, these people in South America do have a base in Hebrew. I would go for Hebrew as a first key, but in another week I might choose differently.
I love that answer, especially the last part, because I'm with you. Every other day, it seems like a different element of Tachlis takes center stage for me. But I think if I had to choose one, Ruven, it would be the L. It would be the learning. I think that if we can start with Torah, if we can start with Talmud, if we can start to learn our history and our tradition, then we will be able to innovate and we'll be able to change to make it relevant for the future. There's a lot happening in America these days, at least, and I appreciate you keeping me honest, Ruth. Like this book tour has made me very humble. Like I can no longer say that I'm speaking on behalf of anyone other than myself, and maybe this tiny little perch here in Silicon Valley. But Jews all over the world do Jewish very uniquely to their communities, which is beautiful. But I can tell you, out here, what's really important is recognizing that the learning in cohorts has been transformational. It's not just kind of having a teacher stand in the front of the room and teach Torah, teach Talmud. It's having these groups of people where you learn, but you also build these connections, because what's happening is in America, they call it DIY Judaism. Have you heard this term? It's do it yourself. And for you to be able to do it yourself at your home and not go to synagogue, with all respect, Ruven, to rabbis and synagogues out there, at least in America, the affiliation is dropping. So ultimately, we need to find ways to inform and educate Jews so they can do it at home themselves from a place of knowledge. And that means more learning. So I would pick the learning, the L, as the centerpiece.
I would like to add something about Zach's work that I appreciate very much, is that he invited Israeli educators and built a fascinating Israeli center inside the American JCC. And Zach, I'm always so impressed with you, how open you are, because I've been around and I've seen the Israeli centers are always divided. And in your JCC, it's all one. And so sometimes to invite educators from different communities and mix them in to the home community is something very enriching, very creative
Thank
for
you.
both sides. It's affecting Israel because Tova is there, and in some ways you are taking Zikaron Basalon and implementing your openness is really unique.
Thank you. Toda rabah. Muito obrigado.
Raul, a palavra é com você.
Raul, the floor is yours now in order to make the question to Daniel. Daniel, thank you very much for having waited until now.
Só algo que a Ruth falou do hebraico.
And before I ask you what I wanted to, Ruth said something about Hebrew that we in the Reform American movement
Fazer o ano do Ben Yehuda,
to organize the Ben Yehuda year and to make our communications to Brazil in Hebrew, because, and this is an important moment in the world. As you heard, our concern is now on the Jewish problems, and we came to the conclusion, original, that this depends on the relevance, and the conclusion that the relevance depends upon the different ways the academy can be. So
Caiu.
peço tremendo
I
relação à
I
formação.
apologize, but his sound is not coming well. Well, in order to create a huge Jewish learning center, what would be your suggestion as a strategy to make this academy?
Daniel está conosco.
We don't know if Daniel is with us. Apparently, his connection went off. Can you tell us why, or do you know why?
Caiu.
No, it's off. He's not with us.
Não entendo os sinais.
He is not with us.
Isso quer dizer que não está.
This means he's not with us. Okay, let's go on, us who are here. Well, I think that this is the moment to see if we have questions from the audience here in attending presentially or from the chat. Do you have questions for Ruth on Zach, who are with us? Maybe, or maybe they want to add something. We have challenges to present to you. Since we taped this, we started to think different things, and I imagine that the same happened to Raul. We have a large audience with us here and online. The question that I received now to you is the following, Zach and Ruth together, is the following. At the end of our discussion, I had asked, why? Why continue Judaism? Why go on with Judaism? And which would be the best way to do it? But we didn't have enough time to say which would be the best way. You said what you prefer, each of you, but which would be the best form? We thought that 2/3 of Jews in most places are outside any community and outside any activity. And we are developing and creating this academy because we believe that one of the possible reasons for them to be apart from us is the lack of diversity. And when we mention lack of diversity, we are not only mentioning different activities, we are saying diversity in the content, because the Jewish history is told in one way or in various ways. But we are telling some versions, constant versions, but there are constant new things coming up. And the specialists in the universities, in the yeshivot, in the larger study centers bring the news. But sometimes the news are lost. They don't come to us. They stay with us. And we want to bring in the core of these news. If one researcher found something new in history, biography, or philosophy, was he able to bring it down to the general public? Because first of all, we think that many people who think that they know everything and were not interested, maybe this will make them get to know something new. And second, because we believe in people, those 2/3 who are not anywhere can enrich a lot our way of reading and understanding Judaism if they are with us, if they are together at our side. And that's why we are developing this academy as a bridge between the news that sometimes are away from us distantly and the general overall mainstream public. Everything that is produced in the yeshivot, in the intellectual groups, how could we bring this into the mainstream Judaism, and could this change it, change everything? What do you think, Zach? What do you think, Ruth?
Ruth, you should go ahead first. I always enjoy listening to you.
I have no translation.
Ops. Não houve... Não? Zach, você recebeu tradução?
Yeah, I figured it out, Ruth. If you
Did you
click on the
hear
bottom of
the,
your
did you
screen,
get the translation?
there's a little thing that says interpretation, and you can turn it into
There are two
your language.
signs.
But all right, so
If she didn't get it, I can go over. Zach, please start. You can start first while she gets over with the buttons.
look, I think it's a really big question, and I'm glad you brought it up. The reality is, we were put on this earth, the Jews, with a purpose. We were meant to be the light unto the nation. We were meant to be the tip of the spear, the folks who are going to be making the world a better place. And unfortunately, that's also the reason why we're often targeted, right? People don't like to have things pointed out to them that are problematic. And that's why the prophets in the Bible weren't always treated so well. I think the recognition that when you are out there sharing with people how to be better, how to make the world a better place, how to make your community better, your environment better, people don't always like that thrown in their faces. And that's why we're seeing many times Jews around the world as the subjects of anti-Semitism and hate. But we are still here for a purpose. God created the world, God created us. And we're out there trying to improve things. I really have this belief that the meaning of life is this idea of tikkun olam. Okay, so I gathered this sense, this notion from the way that the earth was created according to the Jewish mystics, the Kabbalists, that before there was the universe, before there was anything, there was just God. And God made room, made space for the universe through an act of what they call tzimtzum. This act of tzimtzum is an act of compressing a part of God's self to make room for the universe. And in that act of compressing or condensing a part of God's self, I think about it like when you go into a crowded elevator and you suck in your stomach to make room. In that space, God created the universe. And in putting the divine light into the universe, no vessels were strong enough to hold the divine light. So they shattered. The vessels shattered. And our job is to go and find the pieces of divine light to put these vessels back together. That's the act of repairing the world. That's the act of tikkun olam. And so if you recognize that that was the whole meaning of creation, for us to be God's partners in creation, that this whole thing only exists because we have to be partners in this effort, then you realize there's a real purpose to why we're here. There's a real purpose to what Jews here on earth are meant to do. We're the ones who are meant to spread this message to others. And we can do this in any number of ways. We can do this through any number of avenues. So I don't think there's any one particular way that defines the how, but that in my mind is the why.
Could you repeat the question for me? I'm sure that I'm completely clear.
Agora, você está ouvindo agora a tradução, Ruth, ou não?
I'm on
No.
the English.
Ruth, can,
A tradução da pergunta, ok. Agora está ouvindo a tradução do que
você
estou
está
falando?
entendendo? Can you, Ruth?
Não.
No.
I didn't hear the question. No.
Oh,
Mas então Entendeu agora a pergunta? Porque você
only-
não tem a pergunta, mas está ouvindo agora a tradução.
You don't have the questions, but you hear the translation, correct?
No, I didn't. I hear you now as a translator, but you can just repeat the question quickly and I'll do my best.
אני אסכם לך את השאלה מהר מאוד. השאלה הייתה, א', אחרי שהגדרנו למה, איך, מהי הדרך הכי טובה להמשיך את היהדות, לקרב את שני השלישים שלא מגיעים. התזה שלנו היא אולי 2/3 מהעם היהודי, רחוק מאיתנו, מפני שהעצה שלנו היא למרות כל הגיוון וכל הדעות וכל הזרמים, בכל זאת אנחנו מדברים על סיפור אחד, והחידושים נשארים סגורים במגדלי שן באוניברסיטאות, בישיבות, בספרים, בקבוצות מאוד קטנות. אז התזה שלנו היא שהאקדמיה שלנו תוכל להפיץ בצורה רלוונטית, תוססת, יצירתית, את החידושים האלה לאנשים אחרים. ואם נצליח לעשות זאת, א', אנשים שהם לא קרובים אולי יבואו מפני שזאת יהדות אחרת, וב', הם יוכלו להביא איתם קריאות חדשות. וזה יעשיר את כולנו. זאת התזה. מה את חושבת על זה?
So now I'm going into English. I think that always, in all centuries, the Jews that were doing Judaism officially were always a limited number. And the masses of Jews just lived their Jewish life quietly and peacefully. Not everyone was a scholar, and not everybody was a rabbi. And the unaffiliated Jews of the world, that I am one of them, of this community, most of them know what kind of Jewish life they want to live. And I am not, I don't feel any need to judge them. They live a Jewish life, and I think in biblical time and in the rabbinic time, there were always Jews like that did other things. They grew agriculture, they were doctors, they were business people. Not everybody needs to be a professional Jew. Having said that, I do believe in your academia, as well as I believe in Zach's amazing JCC and in Alma and other places in Israel. The basic power unit is to put together a Jewish person, mind, soul, with the classic Jewish text. And out of this meeting comes energy that I believe is can change and awake and fill with life the whole community. I think we should be, my kind of rules or ways of work are, first of all, to be authentic. I think the story that we tell, both as Israelis and as Jews, to ourselves, to our children, and to the world, could be thought about again and brought out in an authentic way of how we see things today. The miracle of building a Jewish state and living in it, for me as a Zionist, together with the weaknesses and the things that we still need to fix and the things that we still need to build, and our need for you, the Jews that do not live in Israel, to look at us, to give us advice, to come and visit, some of you to come and live, to build this project of a Jewish state, a total Jewish environment, total Jewish space together. And it will take longer than 70 years. We are still in the process of building it. I believe that when you offer the classic Jewish bookshelf and Judaism today in a way that is not pushing it to the unaffiliated and not trying to frame it in a framework that everything is perfect and fine. I see around me that young people are and other people are taking the challenge and buying in and wanting to take part, to have a voice, to influence something. And so I think we are offering an amazing project, both of the Jewish community wherever you live in the world, in Brazil, and the fact that you are shareholders in the project of having a Jewish state in Israel. And there are so many ways to take part in that, to come for a summer, to come for a year, to come for a week, to buy an apartment, to support some project, or just to give some advice. How do you see it? Maybe we can do something better. This challenge of how we find each other and connect and build a Jewish world that helps each other, that gives ideas and hashra'a, inspiration to each other, is part of the how. Many times, like with children, you don't need to try too hard. Just believe in your product. And the product, the classic Jewish text, all of them, and our Jewish history is something that is so amazing that I don't feel they need any support in just offering them in a nice, pretty environment with maybe a cup of coffee and the opportunity to be real, to be true, to find the relevance of these texts to the people that will come to the academia.
Ok. Obrigado, Ruth. Vejo que, infelizmente,
I see that unfortunately, Daniel was not able to come back so far. So now, I think I would like to know if, Raul, do you have any other suggestion? Because we have several questions from the audience. Would you like to pose your question to the speakers, and then we come to the audience, because your questions are incredible. The audience is wonderful. I will take the liberty of reading all of them because they were all great. So it will be the challenge for you, members of the panel, to answer. Luciana Lederman wrote a question that was repeated, but all the others are very original. Raul, I would like to put some pepper into what was said so far. I don't want to speak about what the Academy has to do, but what the Academy should treat here: Zionism and democracy, or Zionism, because some say that Israel will be a democratic country because it is a Zionist country, because it is a Jewish country. But some say that it will be democratic because it is Jewish. So what is there on the text about this? This is what I would like to know from you. I would love to answer this, but now I play the moderator. So Ruth and Zach, it's up to you. The ball is with you.
Zach, will I take it first?
Please, Vakasha.
So the question of being democratic and Zionist democratic, is some of the work I tried to do when I was serving in the Knesset, and I tried to legislate the Declaration of Independence that was signed in '48 to be part of our one day to be constitution. And the Declaration of Independence, I did not succeed in doing that yet. But the Declaration of Independence in Israel says that there will be complete equality to all citizens of Israel with no difference of gender, sex, and origin. And indeed, it is a big challenge still in Israel. The state is democratic, but we do live here with two peoples that have, of course, the Israeli Jewish people that are coming back to our homeland, and the Palestinian people that feels that they are not getting equal rights in the state. And in some places, maybe this is something that we should look at and make better and be more sensitive to Bedouins in the Negev, to Arab Israelis and to Palestinians. I think we are in the process of doing so. I think there's a lot of goodwill and effort. It was challenging to come back to this land. It is challenging to find ways and to find partners on the other side to build the democracy that we want to live in, and to keep Israel Jewish in the sense of our public space, the language that we speak, the public school, the holidays, the life in the Jewish cycle, which for me at least mean a lot. This is the feeling of being at home. At the same time, while I don't want to give that up, I do want to be very sensitive, as Jews are, to every minority, and to see where there might be something that needs to be corrected or changed. I saw in the Knesset a lot of goodwill, and I think that it does take time, as we saw in other countries that used to, that started Aborigines in Australia or the natives anywhere in the world. It took a lot of time until everybody found their place in equality, and I think we are in the process of doing so. I think the way Israel is portrayed outside is many times manipulated for political reasons, and we need to separate the challenges that we have, and I'm not saying that there are no challenges, with the politics of media that sometimes is portraying much worse picture than it actually is. There is democracy in Israel today.
Thanks, Ruth. I love that question about where we are with Zionism today. I think it's a really important question and one that we have to address head on. I happen to believe that we're in the third era of Zionism. Zionism has always been an ideology that has evolved over time. But I think that first era of political Zionism was what I call Zionism 1.0. It was kind of the Zionism of Herzl, right? Of the dreamers, of the pioneers, of the folks who said, look, we need a Jewish state to protect us from the anti-Semitism. We need a place to call our own. We need our own sovereignty. We need our own country, our own government, our own laws, our own military to protect us. We need a place to save the Jewish people. And Zionism, again, was meant to do two things, right? It was to solve the problem of the Jews and the problem of Judaism. And I think that Zionism 1.0, when the creation of the state of Israel became the utmost goal, that became fulfilled in 1948. Right? And that's the moment when we shifted into Zionism 2.0, the second era of Zionism. That was the Zionism of the builders, the folks who helped make the state a reality. And I love that Ruth answered this question as an Israeli, and I'm going to offer a diaspora point of view on this. Again, it's maybe an American diaspora point of view, not a South American or Brazilian point of view. But I feel like this era of Zionism 2.0 was defined by what we call diaspora negation, right? It was this notion that you're a better Jew if you make Aliyah, if you come to Israel. If you don't, then you're a lesser than Jew. And so it's your responsibility to support us unequivocally. You in the diaspora, they don't have the chutzpah to make Aliyah. You have to, support Israel financially, politically, with all the resources that you can. And you don't have a right to have a say. You have a stake, but no say. That was the Zionism 2.0. And you had a lot of Jews in the diaspora that were totally fine with that. And what started to happen around the turn of the century, I think around the year 2000, is you started to see more and more diaspora Jews, especially here in America and North America, start to take issue with that notion of diaspora negation. It was kind of like, look, we're here. And if you want us to have a stake in Israel, you need to allow us to have a say. Regardless of how you feel about that, some may say, no, you're not paying taxes. You're not serving the army. Your kids aren't being threatened with bombs in pizzerias, so you don't get to have a say. But there were enough members of the diaspora Jewish community, especially in North America, that did feel like Jews here should have a say, right or wrong, that it started to shift the conversation. And it started to say, all right, we need to figure out, what does this look like? What does the relationship between diaspora Jewry and Israel look like? That was the beginning of this era of Zionism 3.0, where our differences of opinion started to become public, right? It was kind of like back in the day, in the old days of Zionism 1.0 and 2.0, if you had differences of opinion, you should kind of keep it to yourself. It's like, don't air the family's dirty laundry, right? But now, in this era of social media where everything is out there, there's no having a private conversation amongst just the mishpacha, just the family. Now everything is out there, and there's a lot more open criticism of Israel, for better or worse. I'm one of those people who thinks it's probably not such a good idea. When husbands and wives fight, they should probably do that behind bedroom doors, right? It doesn't help either of them when they're fighting in the town square. So when diaspora Jews and Israeli Jews have a difference of opinion, it might not always be the best to take it in public. However, we have no say about that anyway. It's happening. So how do we invent a new era of Zionist ideology? How do we create a moment where we transcend our differences? There's always been differences among our people, right? Since, Joseph and his brothers, since, Jacob and Esau, we've disagreed. Hillel and Shammai, they couldn't even agree on how to light the Hanukkah candles, right? They're the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Look, even in the era of the building of the state of Israel, the Irgun and the Haganah were killing each other, right? We've never agreed. We're not going to agree. There's going to be Orthodox and secular. There's going to be religious. There's going to be, the West Bank settlers and the Tel Avivnik kibbutz. Like, there's going to be differences of opinion, and those in the diaspora and those in Israel are going to disagree. Yet we are family. So how do we rise above those differences, right? All of us have been around Passover Seder tables, I'm sure, or Shabbat dinner tables where there's a lot of political disagreement. How do we still have those meals together? How do we still have respect and love for each other? How do we embrace this notion of unity, not uniformity? And that's what I think is the goal of this next era of Zionism. How do we transcend our differences, embrace our differences, and still recognize we are one of a family?
Ruben.
Now we get to the end of our symposium, and therefore I'm going to read aloud some of the questions. You can choose one or a second, or find a way of answering several of them together, and I'll give 2 minutes to each of you to start elaborating your questions, and we get to the end of our very interesting session. Now we want to introduce to all of you who are present here and to those who are in our streaming. We want to share with you the first 3 courses we will have to organize. Well, the questions first. We have several of them. One was, is really a crisis, quote unquote, of getting away, or is it part of a Jewish hysteria? Is it fundamental? Second, the rituals. To what extent do you think, or what is the place for to practice our rituals in Jewish identity? Is this necessary? Does it inhibit a more deep, profound Judaism? Now, the other question, for those who convert to Judaism, what is the place you think they will find or should have in the future we want to build with all of us together? Another very interesting question is how to adapt the complex, profound Jewish teachings to this the life of TikTok, fast food, and all that we see around us. As someone was very interested in the Alma institution in terms of learning and art, we would like to know how this coexistence of Judaism and different forms of art is coexisting. And other question, the generous, suave side of Israel that wants to illuminate, to give, to receive, how can it survive in this extreme anti-Semitic mean world? Okay, these were the core of the questions. And at last, technology. Do you think that technology is dissipating the community living and existence, or is it making us, getting us close together? So 2 minutes for your final remarks, Ruth and Zach.
Zach, I shall start.
Zach, eu vou
Please.
começar, tá bom? Por favor.
So the first thing I want to say, thank you for the beautiful questions. I'll start from the end. Technology enabled us to be together tonight. Although we are late at night in Tel Aviv, over my bedtime, and Zach is in Palo Alto, and you're in Brazil, and still you see me and I see you through the screen. And I want to say thank you for technology, that the Jewish world can be connected in a minute of Zoom, and we can talk to each other beyond distances and beyond languages. At Alma, since the beginning of COVID, we started Alma in the air, and we are doing a lot of podcasts, videos, YouTube. We do machloket, we do disputes between two intellectuals about an issue every month, and we tape it on YouTube, and then we put it online, and many people can watch it whenever they are comfortable. And all of this is due to technology. I want to say about people that are Jews by choice coming into Judaism to convert into Judaism, as my name is Ruth, and the first convert was Ruth. I believe we have a very important place for people that chose to be part of the community. We need to hug them and to invite them in and to learn from them and to enjoy what they bring into our culture. I am a product of a mixed family between Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews. And I feel that the variety, the differences make life so much richer. And my Jewishness is both Ashkenazi and Sephardi. And so everyone that chooses to become Jewish, the Talmud says, is like a newborn baby. But I want to say, maybe like a newborn, but brings all the heritage and depth and wisdom that they grew up with to our new family. And we are grateful for choosing and coming to be part of us. The last thing I will answer is about the rituals. I love ritual. I love lighting the candles on Friday night, and I love reading the Megillah on Purim, and I love reading Megillat Echa. We do it together with Zach's JCC online in Tisha B'Av, and I fast on Yom Kippur, and I eat matzah on Pesach. I think the rituals are symbols that enable us to live, to experience our values, to plant a tree in Tu B'Shvat. And whenever there is a ritual, I am so happy to build sukkah in Sukkot. They are beautiful ways that were created for us to experience our ideas, ideals, and not only talk about them, not just say it, but actually do it and live it. So I do not give up on any ritual, although I do not belong to the halachic community. I do it because I love it, because I feel connected to it. Now, it could be a Friday that I am not at home and I don't light candles, but whenever I do, I feel that Shabbat is beginning. And when I do Havdalah, I feel that Shabbat is ending. And it is a beautiful tool that I suggest to my children and to any student to use in your own way, in your own values. It is part of our heritage, and it belongs to us, belongs to all of you. So I'm intrigued to understand, to learn Brazilian rituals. I just heard from Raul how they say halach ma'anya in Ladino, and it intrigued me. it's something new that I can learn. So the rituals are the same, but still different. And they absorb the special taste, the special tone of different communities. So keep your rituals and take new ones if you have someone to learn from.
I think I'll pick up where Ruth left off, because I agree 100%, Ruth, me'achuz, that the rituals are vital. They are so vital to keeping us connected, right? If we are a thread that connects the future and the past, right? It's those knots along the thread that we've all done this, that you know that you're eating the same type of matzah that our ancestors ate and that our future will eat. I will add, however, that I think it's also incumbent upon us to reinvent ritual, to update it, to make it more relevant for the modern time. So one of the things that we're working here is a ritual lab. How do we take, I mean, Pesach is a perfect example, the Passover Seder. Every year, we find ways to reinvent the Passover Seder so it becomes much more interesting and fun for our kids, right? There's always ways that the kids are involved with this, but we also do the Passover Seder in the first person so that it becomes very personal. And yet every generation, we're talking about liberation and freedom from something else. It's not just freedom from slavery, right? I remember when we were doing this for the freedom of the Soviet emigre movement, right? I remember when we were talking about women's rights and feminism, and that was a moment of freedom and liberation from the tyranny of the old patriarchy, right? I remember when we did Passover Seders about LGBTQ freedom. We had one recently in the last couple of years about freedom from gun violence here in the United States. Last year, we had a Seder that was about the freedom from restrictions of COVID, right? So in every year, we reinvent our ritual to make it relevant for ourselves and our kids, the next generation. That's so important. So yes, rituals have a very important place, and finding ways to reinvent them is also important. To answer the question about the convert, I agree with Ruth 100%. I could tell you, being in Northern California, in Silicon Valley, where it's a very liberal community, we have many converts who are a part of our community, and many of them are the most active, right? There's the old saying that the converts become the most important zealots, but they're the ones who are getting involved in our community because they've taken upon these traditions, this heritage willingly. They have chosen to be a part of our family. So let's utilize that energy. Let's find ways to bring them in. Plus, it's good to mix up the gene pool a little bit, you know? I'm also a product in many ways. My kids are a product like Ruth's. I married a woman who, her father's Sephardi, her mother's Ashkenazi, and it's been a wonderful thing to recognize that. I have to tell you, Sephardi charoset is a whole lot better than Ashkenazi charoset. I didn't know that growing up, but these are the sorts of things that we get to mix. The last thing I'll say is this idea of technology, because there was the question of kind of how does TikTok fit into today's teachings, and what does technology mean? And because I'm kind of in the epicenter of the digital revolution here in Silicon Valley, I feel like I do have something unique to say about how technology is changing Judaism and the question of whether it will dissipate us or it will bring us closer. I think it's happening anyway. And Judaism has always evolved, right? The rabbis have been around to help us figure out how new technology, I mean, that wasn't necessarily the word that we were using back in the day, but it was technology. The evolution of fire has allowed us to change the rules of Shabbat, for example. And the Eruv is an example of how we have changed what it means to abide by the laws on Shabbat. The Shabbat elevator that you can find in high-rise towers so that you can travel on Shabbat, the Shabbos ovens that turn on and off during Shabbos. Well, I'm living in a place where you are about to have self-driving cars. What is it going to mean when you have a self-driving car? Can you drive on Shabbat? When you pre-program it, the car's going to take you there? What about when you can wear virtual reality goggles and you could be a part of a minyan that is all the way across the world? The rabbis are a little reluctant to say, so I'll end with a couple of stories to just illustrate how technology can, like Ruth said, bring us together, but it's also not always so clear cut. You know, they're starting to make bacon out of cloned pigs. And there's the question, does that mean it's kosher now? The pig was never really alive. It was never really have its soul. So, and there's questions of like the DNA testing with these take-home kits like 23andMe. What happens when they identify a Jewish gene? We've seen how that goes. It's not always so nice for the Jews when they talk, right? So technology can be dark, but there's some ways that it's also very light in bringing us together. And the example I'll give is, you know, when my father of blessed memory passed away 7 years ago, and my brother and I wanted to say Kaddish together, but my brother lives in Colorado. And so we were going to have to say Kaddish together it was Skype at the time. Remember, it was before Zoom. And the rabbis are like, no, you can't do that. You have to be in the same room You can't even be around the corner in a room. I learned all about the rules of saying Kaddish when my father passed away. But still, again, because I'm not Orthodox, I decided sometimes I would say it live with a minion. Sometimes I would say it on Zoom with Skype with my brother. Now, fast forward to today, when everyone is doing blessings on Zoom, right? That we've realized that in this moment of COVID, we had to find ways to bring a minion together. And so Zoom was really, really important, especially in the early days of COVID. And the rabbis were debating whether or not it was kosher to have a minion through Zoom. So technology is forcing us to change the way we think, the way we pray, the way we gather. The last thing I'll tell you is the following. We have a young man out here who moved out here from New York. He was part of an Orthodox community in New York. He came out as gay. The Orthodox community didn't really embrace him. So he came out here, found a home for himself out here, fell in love with a Hindu man, and he wanted to get back into his Jewish study. So he started finding the more observant, the more Orthodox communities out here, and they weren't really embracing of his lifestyle. And then he found the more liberal communities that were embracing his lifestyle, but he didn't feel like that the learning was as deep as it needed to be. And so then he found us, because our JCC, we partner with Alma, we partner with Hartman, we partner with Bina, we partner with institutions in Israel that do really deep Jewish learning. And he fell in love with us. We fell in love with him. Meanwhile, we have to move everything onto Zoom because of COVID. And he calls his mom back in New York and he says, Ima, I'd love for you to be a part of this thing. And so because it's during COVID, it's on Zoom, his mom feels like, okay, maybe I can be a part of this because there's a natural mechitza, a natural separation. So she starts Zooming in to our learning sessions with her son, and they're able to rekindle their relationship because technology provided enough of a barrier and yet also a way to bring us together. It's elu ve'elu, it's both the barrier and the connecting point that now this mother and son have a relationship again only because technology enabled that. So that's an example of how technology can, in fact, bring us together.
That's beautiful. About Alma and art, next time.
Muito obrigado por tudo isso aos dois. Esperamos que possamos fazer muitas coisas.
For your excellent presence with us. And we hope to make a lot of things together. I hope that both of you will be able to visit our academy in presence or online and share your activities with us and bring them into Brazil, whether online or presentially. Thank you so much, Ruth Calderon and Zach Bodner, and we will go on together. This is just the beginning. And now we go to the very last part of our gathering, in which we will show you very shortly the first 3 courses that we will have. I will say something on each of them, and you will mention the pluses, the advantages of enrolling yourself. Okay, so first, the first 3 courses of our academy, and we want to inform you that those who are participating virtually today have already visited the space. Those who have not entered will be able to access it. You just have to log in and register yourselves and enroll through the Academia Judaica space, and then you already enter in the space built to develop knowledge and using the most Jewish method that we have in our tradition, which is the dialogical method of building knowledge through interaction. So this space was built with this purpose, with these principles, and also as a place to warehouse the exchange of bibliographic sources. The content will be there. If you enroll into a given course, you can go back to the course and attend the classes again, interact with the teachers, interact with the other participants. So it is a continuing process, ongoing process, not a given moment process. So we invite you to visit and see the news. Today, we launched 3 courses in the 3 trails, 3 tracks. Now, Rabbi Ruben, please tell us about the tracks. You see the same screen, of course. A lot of technology, I'm sorry. We have 6 main axes. We will start with 3 courses which we thought were very special. One of each of the 3 axes and that encompass the others. The first one we see is 5,000 years of learning in 5 classes. Jewish learning, 4 main areas of the Jewish learning: Tanakh, Talmud, philosophy, medieval philosophy, and the contemporary and modern philosophy. And basically, this is what we did on our Thursday meetings, so famous Thursday meetings. And then we will have women specialists, each of them that devote their lives to the areas. They work on that. They are not specifically rabbis, but they know what it means. Susanna Schwartz will speak about the Bible, Luciana Pajek on the Talmud, Cecilia Cavaleiro, medieval literature, and Luciana Zaterka, who is a specialist in Spinoza. The following course is the Israel Axis, and Gustavo Perednik, besides being one of my mentors in the beginning of my life, is a magistral speaker in hundreds of countries and universities and wrote dozens of books. And he spoke in China and Canada in all the universities, through Latin America, of course, and the US. He will start speaking on the link and the right of the Jewish people with the land of Israel, the polemics, the conquests, the discussions, the arguments, and what we have ahead of us. And at last, Professor Joshua Hollow, the Dean of the HIC Los Angeles, Hebrew Union College, who is the largest university for the study of Judaism in the world. He speaks a beautiful Portuguese, and he is a history professor. He is worked with the Jewish peoplehood. What are we? A people, a culture, a religion, and how this changed in the various contexts. This is Professor Dr. Joshua Hollow. Now, for the launch of these courses, we have a great news, a special discount, a launch discount. You just have to write first class when you enroll, and you will have a 30% deduction during this week for the launch. The cost of the courses will cover the goal of continuing education, not throughout all the process of life, but continuing education during our long-lasting project. We want it to be self-sustaining, and therefore we have to charge for the courses. You can enroll, and for those of you who are members of CIPI or of any of the partner institutions, we will leave it up to the leaders of other Jewish institutions to join our partnership and extend the benefits to their members. For the members of CIPI and partners, there is a special discount. You can check it at the Relationship Center at CIPI. And this is a space to build learning and develop learning in several spheres. Another one is the professional Havurot. Some people ask, what's the professional Havurah? What is it? Professional Havurah, we have some of them with us today. We have 3 already that have been established, and 2 other are going to be set up. These are Jewish professionals who get together to share the details of their profession and to discuss on what Judaism has influenced their profession. Some lawyers have studied about international law and international in the Bible, and I don't have the right words. Jewish doctors who are already sharing the biomedics, the medical ethics, and the challenges of their profession, and analyzing what Judaism says of their practices. We have writers as well. We found out that there are over 200 Jewish writers in Brazil. They subdivide themselves into those who believe that Judaism is in everything they write, and those who regret that Judaism didn't show up yet in what they write. And both of them are very inspired to have their Judaism show up in their writings. We have the Havurah of economists, of businessmen, of musicians, and the psychologist Havurah. And those of you who want to create other Havurot, please contact us and we will do it very gladly. And also, we will provide specific courses because doctors together will study something that they will open up as a course for 4 to 6 meetings course for other groups. Production of materials, and so that we get into Google as something on Judaism, and what the Academia, the Jewish Academy produced will show up there. All the content will be worked together to build a library of Judaism. In Portuguese, we have a lot of material in other languages, in Hebrew and English, but very little material on reflexive and critical Judaism in Portuguese. And this is one of the main goals of our academy. And the first 3 Havurot, Antonio, who is here, a member of the writers Havurah, and Taup, who is a member of the lawyers with judges and ministers of justice and things like that who work with the law. And we also have with us today Dr. Elio from the doctors Havurah, general physicians Havurah. So we are very happy to have representatives of the groups already exists here. Having said all that, we have also Raul Gottlieb from Rio together with us in the transmission. He will now offer us his closing words. Maybe Raul has final words for the group, and then we close. First, I want to emphasize the willpower of Mario Fleck when building this academy. We who work as volunteers, once Mario said that we are curious people, very enthusiastic about Judaism, feel a great lack of places to learn high-level learning in Brazil on Judaism. And the idea of building this academy, everyone here already had it sometime, but the willpower to do it is all due to Mario. We have to applaud him. He deserves a very special mention, and I feel obliged to say this for his transforming action. And thank you very much for making me a member, a part of this enterprise. With that said, we can thank you all. We would like to thank CIP's team that made this event a reality. This event was organized not only by the Jewish Academy, but also jointly with all the areas of the Kehillah here of CIP, and without you, we wouldn't have done. We would like to thank you all, and also your presence here, all of you who have joined us in presence today, and all those thousands of people who are with us virtually. Thank you all. We hope to see you, ladies and gentlemen, in the first 3 courses, and in all those who who will come after. And we are willing to see your new proposals. Thank you very much.